Hey everyone, welcome back. Or if you're just joining us, welcome to KSSP Podcast. I'm Spencer.
And I'm Katie. Today we're going to be talking about, MMT, which is Modern Monetary Theory. And we are going to start off with a video.
And that video is
economically dominant countries like the United
Modern Monetary Theory explained in 1 minute by 1 Minute Economics. So here we go.
Economically dominant countries like the United States and Japan know that pretty much everyone wants their currencies. Poorer countries far less so, which is why they oftentimes have to, for example, borrow in dollars. According to modern monetary theory, or MMT, countries such as the US and Japan can be far more aggressive when, quote-unquote, printing their problems away. As such, 1. Why issue bonds when you can just create money directly to fund various expenses? 2. Unemployment is considered a consequence of governments engaging in spending too timidly. When resources such as, in this case, labor, are not being used by the private sector, why not create money and offer a job guarantee to everyone? 3. If inflation becomes a problem and there's too much money chasing goods and services, can't we simply raise taxes and remove excess liquidity? Needless to say, for approaches this aggressive, MMT has received its share of criticism. For example, 1. What about the independence of the central bank? More specifically, what if the government demands money creation for MMT policy reasons and the central bank refuses?
Wait,
2.
pause.
For something
I don't think it should have that authority.
Right. Like, can they actually do that? Just say, like,
That's
F you to the
concerning.
government? Like, that's not good.
No.
Like, I think the government should have a little more control over that.
I assume it's
It
to
is
be
Federal
a
Reserve after all.
yeah, and I assume it's to be part of the checks and balances, but it doesn't make sense to me because then if they wanted, they could basically tell, so let's say the government actually cared about us citizens and wanted to fund public health care. So the Federal Reserve can be like, nah, no, never mind. We don't think you should, like, what?
Yeah,
How is
no.
that appropriate at all?
And like that, we don't even democratically elect the people in charge of the Federal Reserve.
No.
So like, how is that a democracy? How is that fair? You know?
That is concerning. That seems easily corruptible compared
Yes.
to our democracy. Yeah. And I guess I don't have much information on that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
I don't feel if that is reality, they definitely should not have that ability at all to tell the federal government no, because the federal government funds them too, you know?
Right.
Like the federal government should get to decide how and what it does with its money.
Yeah, our elected leaders should decide what we do with our money based on what the constituents want.
Yes, and I am fine with maybe the Federal Reserve being like, we're concerned this may affect inflation, and then they can have that discussion, but just they still should not have the final say on whether or not the government can spend the money. The federal government should have that say because they are the ones that we elect, so they are the ones that we want to have that say. We don't want someone who we don't elect controlling our money, you know?
Exactly.
Okay, we'll see what else they...
Involving such aggressive currency creation, shouldn't one be more creative when thinking about how inflation can be tackled rather than focusing so much on the effectiveness of taxation in this context, for which there isn't nearly enough relevant evidence? 3. What about market psychology issues? How much would be too much and lead to market participants no longer accepting the currency of a country with overly aggressive policies? All in all, modern monetary theory is just that at this point.
Yeah, that's the stupid thing about money is that, like, if nobody believes in it, it doesn't work anymore. Like, the only thing that makes money valuable is people's belief that it is valuable. Like, it's just a piece of paper, ultimately, that verifies your labor, basically. Like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You know what I'm trying to say?
I think nationally, yeah. But for us, even if the like value of the dollar globally decreased or lost its influence as American citizens, the government would still charge us in the US currency. So even if we are like, well, the US currency is valueless, like has no value anymore, the government would still be like, well, you still have to pay me $10 or you're going to be thrown in jail, regardless of if
Right,
you
you still have
believe
to
the
pay
$10 is valuable. So
because you
that they use that as a
sales
way to.
tax, you know,
Hmm?
you still have to pay like sales tax and taxes on what
Yeah.
you're working, and like, you know, maybe property tax if you have property, like things like that. You know, you
So
still
I
have to
would
pay the government in money. Like
agree
the
that
government's not.
the idea really isn't, it doesn't have the idea itself, there literally is no value to money. It is literally just what we give it value, but it's a structure. It basically just helps us structure society, really, is all it. I mean, it's been used negatively to negatively impact our society in a way to where people think if you have 1,000, like a bank account where you have ones with a bunch of zeros, then you somehow have more wealth or like more
Yeah,
value than someone who has less than that. But at the end of the day, it's just a number in an account. It doesn't mean any, like,
right,
it does because we give it meaning, but it doesn't need, like, it
right.
doesn't
It
truly
doesn't
mean
mean you're
anything.
better than anybody to have more money.
No.
It just, it might mean you have more power and influence, but it doesn't mean that you're inherently a better person than anybody else who doesn't have that kind of money.
Yeah. We'll keep going
A
here.
theory. One, however, that has become more popular in light of the economic effects of the pandemic. From more being done on the fiscal policy front to an increased eagerness to experiment, it is therefore likely that it will be put to the test in one form or another. Love it or hate it, MMT is probably coming in at least some form.
That's good. That sounds promising.
Yeah, I hope. I will be very interested in kind of seeing how it's utilized, because from what I've researched and read about it, I think it would be for the betterment of all of us as citizens personally, and we'll go into more in depth in some of the other videos too. But that was a good video, kind of giving a little intro to.
Yes. I hear you. So, okay. I have this article from businessinsider.com. What is modern monetary theory? Understanding the alternative economic theory that's becoming more mainstream. So here's some main points here. So according to the MMT theory, deficits don't matter as much as we think they do and aren't necessarily a signal of a shaky economy. So Insider Expert shows the best products and services to help make smart decisions with your money. Here's how. In some cases, we receive a commission from our partners, however, our opinions are our own. So basically, you're saying it's an opinion piece, okay. Modern monetary theory is an alternative economic theory that suggests the U.S. government can create more money. Modern monetary theory claims that because the government is the issuer of money, it can create more since it's no longer backed by gold. And proponents think modern monetary theory can counter many economic problems, while opponents fear inflation and increased deficits. So let's see. Modern monetary theories, the economic theory suggesting the government could simply create more money without consequence as it's the issuer of currency, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond. As part of this theory, the thinking is that the government deficits and national debt don't matter nearly as much as we think they do. The whole idea of MMT is that since a sovereign entity can borrow its own currency, it can print more money when it needs to pay off all its debt. The central bank just needs to keep interest rates low, says Robert R. Johnson, professor of finance at Hyder College of Business at Creighton University. So MMT is essentially a paradigm shift when it comes to economic theory and a new way of thinking about governments with fiat currencies. So here's a quick fact. Fiat currency is money that is issued by a government authority that isn't backed by a particular commodity, such as gold. The U.S. has a fiat currency that is issued by the government and is considered legal tender, which is used to exchange value in the form of money. So, yeah, we kind of talked about this before. Some governments, they use fiat currencies. They're not constrained by their tax revenues when it comes to government spending and can perpetually run a budget deficit. This is due to the fact that the central banks in these countries have a monopoly on the supply of money. This is opposed to when the USD was on the gold standard and made a fixed number of dollars in circulation based on the amount of gold we had in vaults, notes Cullen. It was an archaic form of monetary policy because governments with full control of their money supply do not need to confine themselves to a traditional household budget that manages revenues and expenses because they essentially have an Amex black card of unlimited money that they do not have to pay back. So the main tenets of modern monetary theory: government deficits aren't inherently bad. If the government can simply create more money, then the government deficits could easily be fixed. Governments can create more money without threat of economic collapse. So given the fact that money is no longer backed by gold and is more theoretical in the sense it can be created at any time, many MMT supporters believe that money can be created without tanking the economy. Because the government is the creator of the currency, it doesn't need to adhere to the same individual budgeting principles. So proponents of MMTs say that the government doesn't need to abide by standards in which our expenses shouldn't exceed our income or else it'll lead to debt. So we don't need to abide by those standards since it is also the creator of money, and theoretically the government can create more. A federal jobs guarantee program is possible. So the core tenet that the government can create more money, MMT theorists support the idea of a federal job guarantee as a way to stabilize the economy and put money toward human capital. And the federal interest rate should be at 0%. So many MMT supporters believe the natural rate of interest is 0 and there should be no bond sales. On top of that, MMT supporters want to do away with the increasing and lowering of interest rates as they're ultimately not that relevant when it comes to growth and long-term business decisions. So then there are concerns over modern monetary theory. So the primary criticisms are increased inflation. However, this theory shouldn't set a precedent as all other factors are not the same, and one of primary indicators of inflation, economic scarcity, has not been part of the equation. More deficits, while it's not a concern for MMT proponents, it's concerning for others who think that lending and interest rates may be compromised and cause inflation. So examples in Venezuela, Zimbabwe, Germany, and more have shown potential downsides, destruction, and hyperinflation. So according to the Brookings Institution's previous historical examples show clearly that creating more money can lead to hyperinflation and unrest. Though inflation is a big concern, there are other ways to manage government spending and taxation to deal with it. So the government can essentially print as much money as it would like to fund essential services and programs and also stimulate the economy. And when inflation rises to an undesired level, you can increase taxes to bring inflation back down to your target rate, says Cullen. It's sort of a seesaw because the government can add money to the money supply when needed, then tax more to take that money back out of the circulation and decrease inflation. So the United States is not Venezuela. The U.S. government borrows a lot of money. About a third of the borrowing is from foreigners. It's not a problem in the way that, let's say, if Venezuela borrowed from foreigners or Argentina or a lot of developing and less developed countries. Because those countries, when they borrow from foreigners, borrow in dollars, they can't print the dollars. So if their currency starts to depreciate against the dollar for whatever reason, it becomes almost impossible for them to pay off their debt. The MMT people totally understand this, and they say that for a country that borrows in its own currency, this is not a problem, and they are right. So modern monetary policy is the most effective way to transfer wealth from the working class to the elite. When more money is created, it generally goes directly to the largest investment banks, which have the closest relationship with the central bank and the Treasury Department. This means that the wealth of the working class, generally stored in cash or bank accounts, loses its purchasing power. Meanwhile, the purchasing power of investment banks grows exponentially. And then why the proponents have it wrong. This is from thinkadvisor.com, Why MMT Haters Have It Wrong, economist Michael Norman. So Norman, founder of the weekly MMT Trader Report, argues that MMT, which holds that a swelling U.S. deficit is no problem since the country prints its own money to fulfill pressing national needs, is a help to investors. It gives them a correct understanding of Bayesian conditions in the economy, he says. Critics, on the other hand, call it socialist or communist and argue that it can lead to hyperinflation. Those who dismiss MMT include Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, Warren Buffett, Larry Fink, BlackRock Chairman CEO, and Jeffrey Gundlach. Norman argues that there's a shadow or clandestine reason MMT is disliked. Big money interest. Large corporations and the very, very wealthy want to keep the prevailing system exactly as it is because changing it isn't going to benefit them. MMT can help financial advisors help their clients because Norman says advisors are just throwing darts at a dartboard. They don't have a correct understanding of the basic conditions of the economy. So his current forecast for the stock and bond markets are bullish. In the interview, he names equity sectors he likes as well as reveals just what would prompt him to take all of his money out of the market or even sell short. The expert says, I call the inflation transitory. The supply chain disruption is starting to loosen up. That, he says, is a prelude to the end of now rising inflation. So what does MMT say about the U.S. economic stimulus? The stimulus is the understanding that the government can spend what it needs to spend, whatever its priorities are. If you need to give people supplementary unemployment checks or you need to expand Medicare or have Medicare for all, it's not a financial issue. It's an issue of resources. So what makes it controversial? 2 reasons. Number 1 is an open reason, and then there's a shadow or clandestine reason. The open reason is that people believe that if the government spends money, it will lead to inflation or hyperinflation. That is a straw man argument. The second reason is that the powers that be, those that control policy, big money interests, large corporations, the very, very wealthy, don't need to change the system. The system functions fine for them with unprecedented wealth and income inequality. Changing the system isn't going to benefit them, so they have no interest in MMT. So people who argue against MMT might call it socialism. They might call it communism, crazy stuff like that. That's one of the fallacies in narrow thinking. The U.S. federal government isn't limited in its ability to create currency and to pay for whatever it needs in its own currency. So the detractors say if the government makes all the spending decisions, then the government is involved in the economy, and that's basically socialism. But MMT is not socialism because the private economy is still providing the goods and services. It's just that the government's spending ability to make a national investment to maintain our standard of living. And that doesn't equate with socialism. The government is one that's spending. The private sector is delivering the goods and services. And I'm just going to add, if it was socialism, then there would be a democratic workplace. There would be, more equal pay. And the goods and services would be provided by the workers, not the private sector. And so it doesn't equate with socialism necessarily. And the thoughts about rising inflation, he calls this inflation transitory. A lot of industrial companies were able to price higher. Some had to set a price higher. In many ways, the government itself is a price setter because it sets interest rates. A lot of people think that when they push rates up, that quashes inflation. But in fact, it has the opposite effect. When rates increase, you literally raise the general price level. That's something the government does through the central bank.
So now I think we have a little bit better of it's still a big concept, so it's going to take some time to probably digest everything. But I think we have a decent explanation of just an overall of what MMT is. So in the next episode, we're gonna discuss the federal government and budgeting. So you can leave a comment below. So we'll hope to see you in that episode. And you can also leave a comment below letting us know what topics you want us to go over in future episodes.
Yeah, and you can reach out to us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and we occasionally do Twitch live streams, so you can watch out for us there.
So don't forget to like, follow, or subscribe, and turn on notifications so that you know when we do. And we will see you in the next episode.